Marc Eichinger, good morning to you from Singapore. It's a pleasure.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to speak with you today. And thank you for welcoming us in your house, I believe, from France. So could you please introduce yourself for our audience in Singapore and, of course, around the world?
Yeah, my name is Marc Eichinger. I'm 58 years old. I now live near Geneva on the Lake Léman, and I started my career working as an auditor. I was a qualified accountant. I started as an auditor, but I mainly worked in bank, and I started working as a trader for BIAO, which was a bank dedicated to Western Africa. And I mainly worked in dealing rooms. So I started as a trader on all kinds of instruments. And then I built up my reputation. I worked for Mitsubishi Bank at the time where Japan was very strong. When the banks were in Japan the big banks where most of them were AAA, and we had a lot to do overnight. We were number one in yen-denominated product in Europe. So we were building up our book during the day and squaring the book at night, or at least reducing the exposure at night, which meant that we had to work on a 24-hour basis, and this required some heavy training to do that. And then because I published a lot articles and books, my first book was published on the Japanese banking system when I was 28. Then I published a new one 2 years after that regarding the international crisis while we attacked the British pounds and the Bank of England successfully. At the time, it was George Soros Quantum Fund who was doing that, and we joined that. I joined that. And so I built up a reputation and worked for BBA, Banque Bruxelles Lambert, which became ING. And then overall, after all these years in the banking system, I stopped working on these issues to work on war zone, and of course 9/11 came in between, and I used my skills to hunt terrorism financing and the people who were doing that. So this brought me to Iraq, this brought me to North Kivu, to a lot of parts in Africa. And I spent the last 7 years in Niger. I stopped working in Niger in January 20. And at that time, I was under contract with Control Risk Group, which is a private military company managed by former SAS. So I had quite a busy life, I would say. And still today, I keep on doing intelligence, but not as you would imagine in a secret manner. I mean, I just collect information and I give it to Homeland Security Services. And mainly everything which is regarding corruption, I help them to understand international corruption. I help them to do their job in a way that these French services or Swiss services are unable to fight against organized crime while they don't have the means, and especially abroad. So I help them to improve their ability to do that.
So that's quite a lot. That sounds like multiple lives rather than just one life. You were basically one of these, I think you used that term in other interviews, the golden boys. You were during that golden boy era, which was very notorious for the amount of excess in lifestyle behavior that people had to either maintain themselves there or to benefit from whatever amount of money they were making and using their lifestyle behavior as an exit strategy. So that's a very different lifestyle behavior and occupation than being a special force or being deployed in very harsh environment. What kind of a person can go from one to the other? And did it require specific things that you've either learned as a child or that you developed as a young adult that helped you in terms of surviving these very different environments? One, which is surviving probably psychologically, and the other one, which is surviving physically as well as psychologically. So can you help us understand what kind of person can go from, this sort of environment to another one and use very specific things like what was your sleep like, what were your food intake, did you even focus on that? And I think that's something that would interest a lot of people.
Yeah, first of all, when you look at my education, my father did the World War II and managed to survive the Nazi camp. He was a Protestant, but he was a resistant, and he spent 18 months in Buchenwald. It was a pretty rough experience, as you can imagine. And he always told me, it's all in your mind. Of course, your body is important. You have to train, but determination is key in what you do. And you find the same kind of experience if you go to the Foreign Legion or the Special Forces. You have a period of training, and they tell you if you want to stop having pain, you can always ring a bell, and then it stops. But everyone is going to see you ringing the bell, failing. And I have been told to never ring the bell. So, and from very young. So that gives you an experience. And then when you train like this, no matter how bright you are, you always progress. And as a trader, I was constantly keeping fit, never being addicted to anything, sugar, of course, drugs, very few alcohol, and a lot of training, physically training. And I was keen in doing martial arts and scuba diving, all kind of things, swimming, all kind of things that could train my heart and my body on long-term distance, and as well on the rough activities. It helps to balance your mental activity and your physical abilities. That's one thing very important that helped me all along my life. I never stopped training. Even today, I train at least 1 hour a day, no matter what. And then along the years, of course, it helps because you are a golden boy, you make your money. It helps to ease the pressure, the social pressures that people have in their everyday life. If I had been a plumber, it would have been probably different. But I'm in my first million. I was something like 28, 29. My house was paid. While it takes around 20 years for other people to pay their house, and my wife could stop working and because she wanted and take care of the children. I have 2 children. It helps to make a choice, the choice of the life that you want to have. People have to remember you only have one life. It's quick, and you better not spoil it. So I always wanted to have something exciting, something that would be unforgettable. So working in the banking environment was pretty interesting because it was on trading. And trading is an economic war every day. You have to swallow a huge amount of information. At least at that time, you have to swallow a huge lot of information. We never had any artificial intelligence like today. We could deal on a very huge amount just because the regulation was pretty different. Remember what happened to bearings in Singapore? The same could have been, it would have been my case as well. We were doing a large amount, and it was really a dogfight every day. For this, you need to be able to work sometimes on a 24, 48-hour basis. 48-hour basis means that you have to have a proper training to keep drinking or having something in your stomach every 3 hours. The more you drink, the more you piss, the more you stay without sleeping. And at the end of the 48 hours, you still have to be strong enough to keep on fighting for the last hour. And that's pretty important. And you have the same kind of training in war zone. The difference is that you risk your life in war zone, while you in a training room, I was only risking my social life, which is very different. But overall, it helps a lot. This kind of training is helping a lot. And if you compare the activity with what people are doing in war zone, if you take the Marines, for example, they are trained to fight, but they are mainly muscles. And that's why when we had to rebuild Iraq, it was pretty difficult for them to understand how things were really being done, because they were only understanding what they had learned, which is a military experience, and they had no idea how the social life would be for the civilians. And when you have to face an irregular warfare, you have a professional military army like the Marines facing civilian army, civilian groups, and it's pretty different than a regular war. And within irregular warfare, you have to behave like an anthropologist. You have to behave like a physician. You have to understand why people don't have access to basic medicine, why they don't understand what is a baker. Just because the kids in the street, the only thing they saw is people fighting. And for them, being a baker in a bakery is not a job. The job is to have a gun and threaten people. So all kind of things that you don't learn in any school, but you learn on the ground, and you need a good background to be able to improve things, make reports, and hopefully, make things change. But then when I worked in Iraq, I was pretty isolated in a place called the Castle, nicknamed the Castle, and it was a former fortress destroyed by bombs during the Iraqi freedom operation. And the people who were inside had been burned. The Iraqi soldiers were burnt to the ground. And the fortress was pretty destroyed, but we could live in it with my group. And we stayed there because the local people believed that they were ghosts, because the soldiers couldn't have been buried properly according to Muslim religion, and they believe in ghosts. So we were quite safe in one way, because they wouldn't approach this place. So it was a base where we stayed, where we could relax at least at night, and keep on doing intelligence, keep on doing our operation, and it was close to Kirkuk. So it was an interesting experience.
So let's take a step back. So you basically, you make your money, you live the life of a golden boy, but not really, because for some personal reason you decide this is not the route that you want to go. So what makes you go from, say, okay, I've made my money, now I could continue on making money in a different way, I could start becoming an entrepreneur, I could do whatever, to I'm going to grab some training, I assume I'm going to get some weapons, I assume, and then I'm going to get deployed by XYZ agency. It's irrelevant to some extent which agency. Yeah. And I'm going to put my life at risk. I'm going to put other people's life at risk, possibly for saving me back. So what's the logical, if there is any logical jump from, scene one in your life to scene two? Is it adrenaline seeking? Is it a sense of purpose? Is it like the ultimate excitement? So, help me understand what makes this coherent to some extent.
Yeah, when I was a trader and head of trading, I was used to attack currencies. So in 95, you had the Thai baht crisis, and that's a good example. The forces that we had gathered were much more important than the National Bank of Thailand forces. There was no way they could escape the attack, and there was no way they had the foreign reserve to stop the attack. We did devalue the Thai baht at the time within 24 hours. It was very quick. Then I realized that what I did was, it was like giving on Monday, you had a plate with something in your plate to eat. And for the Thai people on the next day, they had half of the plate. And I realized what I was doing was pretty stupid, and that my life was pretty empty in a way. Apart from making money, with money, I wasn't able to do anything else. And I was far from using my background, my skills and everything. I was just, I buy, I sell, how much? after a while, even if you make money, you really feel, you don't feel bad, but you feel useless. And you feel a bit trapped in this system because every day you go to your dealing room, you buy, you sell, you make your money. The next day you do exactly the same thing. It's always the same routine. And you are at the top of the ladder. If you imagine that living condition is some kind of ladder, you are at the top for sure. And everyone is looking at you as a successful man. But inside you look at a lie. I mean, your life is just a lie. You just do nothing special. It's something that anyone could do. And then you want to try to see what's below. And then you start going down the ladder. And the ladder is going very deep. And then I went very deep. Honestly, when you feel that you are less than a dog, you start reaching, you don't reach the bottom, you never reach the bottom, but it's a pretty important experience. And it's worth it to do that because it reminds me a poem that my father gave me. It was If from Kipling. If you can stand being a king one day and nobody the next day, then you are a man. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that I had the guts to do that. And the opportunity, between brackets, came with the 9/11. The world changed, no matter how you look at it. The world changed. I closed the book on the trading side and I opened a new book on helping agencies which were in desperate needs of qualified manpower to look at terrorism financing, and that you have to do it on the ground. Nowadays, you have countries like Qatar financing terrorism. But at the time, it was new. You had to understand the networks. You had to understand how Al-Qaeda was financing its activities. It was pretty different than today. And going to Iraq was also an experience because it was an American military intervention. We were, as a Frenchman, we were not supposed to be there. We were opposed to the war. But over there, I met an American, and he was in distress, a former FBI agent. He was in distress, and we had a human being understanding, so that we managed to be safe both together, and rather than being apart. It was some kind of, we recreated the same community that after World War II, when the Americans came to, say, France, and that's something that in my family we would never forget. Within this same spirit, we could build up an activity, and that's what we did.
So just for the sake of it, because that's certainly in the imagination of lots of people. So here you are making the decision that you want to become, I don't even know what the right term is. Is it an agent? Is it intelligence officer? Is it a special force? I don't know what the right term is. And to some extent, it doesn't really matter. But you want to become one of these people that the imagination of the general public, including myself, it just goes wild on, like, oh my God, these guys must be doing all kinds of training and they must be prepared to do all kinds of things. So were you confident that physically you could sustain this sort of training if you were going to receive it? Did you receive it? And if you receive it, were you confident that you were capable of doing it? Because most people would think, well, how would I know that I can get the training done? And then once I'm deployed, that I can actually sustain things like the condition of the country. You mentioned Iraq, it's a very hot country. You mentioned Africa, very hot, very dry, very difficult living condition. And could I sustain it psychologically? These are the two questions that people would generally have. So did you ask yourself these questions? And if you did, how did you answer them?
Well, you see, still going back to the concentration camp, you see that first of all, your body can take a lot. It's all in your mind. So I would say almost anyone can be commando, special forces, or anything, as long as you have the determination. It's 80% in your mind and 20% your physical ability. You have to be trained, but you are not trained from nothing to a high level. I was already at a high level, and I did some more to improve. But I trained in Iraq with Commando of the Foreign Legion, with SAS. Before a mission, we were repeating the training as long as I was ready. Usually, I was getting up front to have a meeting with people, to collect information, to do my job, and then the team was behind. It was a rescue team which was behind. It had to be at a certain time, at a certain place. And if I was missing it, then I would have a new rendezvous, a new appointment. And other way, they could have rescued me if things were wrong. I was sending a signal, and they would intervene. But then still, you have to be ready to react properly, and then you have to train. As long as your training is not perfect, then you don't do your mission, or you do it differently. But when you get used, and because you risk your life, there is no question of I am tired, I am this, I am that. You train, and that's it. You are an animal. You are not a man. You are a dog. You are less than a dog, and then you bite. And still, when people say war dogs for mercenaries, they have to remember that a war dog is a dog before anything. And then it's clear that you have to be violent, aggressive, and that's the way you can stay alive. In this very rough environment, there is no other choice. There is no room for weaknesses. You must have understanding for the souls that are coming close to you, because they suffer. But for yourself, you must have no mercy. You don't have to eat every day. You need to drink, but you don't have to eat every day. You don't have to sleep in the bed. You can sleep on the floor. You have to behave like a dog. If you behave like a dog, you are good. And you don't have to have good food. People, when they eat meal ready to eat, which is MRE in the military terms, they used to eat a lot of calories, more than 1,000, because they need the calorie for the day when they fight. That's far too much, and I don't like it. I prefer to eat what people are eating, if they have anything. If you have rice, you have rice. Eggs, you have eggs. But you have to eat what the local people will eat, so that you can understand how they work, what they feel. And your enemy doesn't have MRE. They have the local food. So you have to learn how you can get local food, because they will do the same. And then you understand their life, and you see them differently. In some cases, you see them differently. In Niger, at least, I would say that I understood that people were having such a hard life, always under dictatorship, that the only choice that they had would be to choose freedoms through violence and terrorism. That's the only choice that they have. So you look at them differently. Of course, it's still your enemy, but you can talk to them. You can talk to them because you ended up at the same level. And to go back to your physical needs, drinking clear water is of the utmost importance, because you cannot manage. You try to avoid getting sick. You try to have a cholera, so you need an access to clear water and or hot water. But apart from that, your body can stand the pain at least during 2 days, if not 3. You can eat almost very few, and you will lose weight, but you don't lose your abilities to do things, and that you have to learn that, and it works. There is no problem. For sleeping, well, you have people ending up sleeping on the floor better than in a bed, and just because they feel safe at this place. And if you are safer, then sleep on the floor. That's it.
And the people around you, so I'm guessing you got exposed to different nationality, different level of training, different backgrounds. Typically in these environments, the cost, the psychological cost and the physical cost of someone in those jobs is very high. So I'm curious to hear from you, what else did you observe around you from perhaps people that were in mission with you or the enemy? What were their physical state? Was drug a big part of this? Is it how you keep people going back to very, very dangerous environment and being able to put their life at risk? What's the general state of these people that are deployed on the ground?
Drug is one of the biggest risks that you will face in war zone, because it's easy. You find pills that are rather cheap, especially now. Tramadol, the things with opium inside. You don't fly high, but you feel good. You don't have the pain anymore. You also take a lot of pills that will help you not to sleep, but you have the addiction. Some people would find cocaine is very expensive, but they would try to get drugs that they like, hashish or anything that would help you to stand the pain and the stress. And that would definitely create a lot of trouble, and probably I would say that would kill you on the long run, either in the war zone or at home when you come back. You have a lot of people suffering from PTSD that took drug, and that's why they have this problem. Not only because of the violence, but because they have this addiction and they don't sleep at night. You need to keep a cycle by which you work and then you sleep, then you work and you sleep. But if you start being completely out of time, and then you keep staying awake because you take the drug, and then that you are lost. At a certain time, you are lost. One of my best friends stayed 4 years in Iraq in a row. That was too long, and he ended up completely crazy just because he was on drug every day. He was taking pills. He was taking pills to stay awake. He was taking pills that would help him working, to be physically strong. You never stop. And then at the end, your brain is so fucked up. Then of course, when you have to stand difficulties, you don't understand what's going on. You start being afraid of people. You don't have the same reaction than normal people who are not addicted in anything. You are unable to be understood by your own family. That's also the big risk. When you are coming back from these places, your family doesn't understand because they don't have the same life. And you go to the supermarket to do your shopping, and you have people around you. You have to understand that they are not a threat. If you are not addicted to anything, it takes time, but you can manage. If you are addicted, there is no way you can come back, and you stay over there, and you are lost. And the big progress that a physician could do when they have to deal with PTSD would be to understand that these guys have been taking drugs, no matter if they stopped very brutally when they are coming back, but at a certain time they are taking drugs. And they have to clear the brain from this shit, really.
It's not possible all the time, because depending on the drugs, there's types of drugs who actually are effectively killing neurons, and that's a no return job. So
yeah. But see, during World War II, the Germans were good. People were saying, that the Wehrmacht was very good because they didn't fear anything. Of course, they didn't fear anything because they were using epiprine, and yes. and they had more than an addiction. I mean, without that drug, the war would have been far different. You have the same problem with ISIS. And you have the same problem with the Boko Haram, with this kind of insurgency, because they are high on drug. These drugs are coming from China and India to Nigeria, and it's spreading in all West Africa. It's pretty cheap. And you can see the truck driver, for example, they have a very rough life, and they take up to 5 pills at the same time. These are mainly tramadol. And they feel good. They don't feel hungry anymore. They don't feel the pain. These guys are always sleeping under their truck, like really like dogs. They take a shower once a month. They are very skinny. They don't have access to food. Their life is pretty rough. And it helps them to feel good, but it's also damaging their brain very heavily.
So you never took drugs yourself, no. And so the motivation for not taking drugs was based on what? Was based on evidence of watching other people downturn, or was it based on something which you had a higher conviction that you want to do this because you want to sustain this career for long? You don't endanger your family back home. What was the motivation there? Because it must be very available.
Yeah, but you see what's happening to the others, and you know that really what matters, what is your asset? Your asset is your brain. Your asset will dictate your body condition. When you are at a very high level of training, and a long-distance runner will understand what I'm going to say, you can separate your brain from your body. When you are on long-distance running, doing a marathon, at a certain time, you don't think that you are running. Your body is running, but your brain is somewhere else. You don't feel the pain anymore and things like this. That does help. That's a training that you have to acquire as well. That does help, of course. It's clear that the threat of the drug was much important, and that I would never even try, just because that's your brain is your first asset, your first defense, and will dictate your fate whenever you have to be exposed to violence, and it can be at any time.
You described a little bit what the experience of training for something very special and keeping fairly clean while being there. So I think a lot of people also would wonder what happens to that same person once they get on the plane, they get home, wherever that is. And you said that you have a family, which I'm assuming some of the colleagues that you have don't necessarily have family. So the conditions there are very different. A, you have to re-enter civilian society. B, you have to re-enter a personal civilian society. How is that for you, and what did you do? Did you have massive adaptation time? Did you have like a SAS where people were not supposed to talk with you or to interfere with you? What was the protocol that you put in place to be able to get that through?
For some people, they have a SAS. For me, I had no SAS. I was just coming back from Iraq or Niger within, let's say, 1 day, and it's too short. The risk is high that you have you can have an aggressive reaction. But if you are well trained, you understand your body can be still aggressive, and then you stay away from the supermarket. You stay away from the people. Fortunately, I live by the lake here. And it's very peaceful, so you can go into the nature. We have the mountain behind. You can go into the nature and escape from the social life. For people living in cities, it's a hell, because they have people around them, they have noises, they have people being aggressive in the street and things like this. I remember once I came back, last time I came back from Iraq, actually, I was under fire during the day. I took my plane at night. And when I arrived in Geneva. It was very peaceful, of course, Geneva, but I still was looking at the snipers, and I was feeling uncomfortable because there were too many cars in the street. And then I realized, oh, it's Geneva. Okay, it's over. But it took me some time. I had to spend one night in an hotel before I could go back home. Well, I was very close from home, and my wife couldn't understand it. And I told her, well, it's better like this, because you can have a very violent reaction anytime. In airports, the custom, the personnel of the custom were used to guys like us, and they were putting us apart from the other people. So, and they were nice with us. They were talking to us quietly, and they were trained for that. So we had no problem. But I give you another example. Coming from Niger, I had to stand difficulties because I faced a young pregnant woman that couldn't deliver naturally. I tried to transport them to the hospital. and it took too long. It was too late, too long. You just transport the woman, the young woman, in the back of your pickup like you would do with a ship, and she dies. Of course, it's very painful. Of course, you remember her eyes, you remember her screaming, and finally, you know that she died. The baby died, and it's not one case. It's coming back every time that you try to help pregnant women to go to the hospital. You never saved anyone. At the end of the day, you remember their face, you remember their eyes, and it's coming back at night. So you have your little ghost coming back at night, and you pile up your little ghost, which is pretty embarrassing to a certain point. But then you have to get used to it. You will never forget that. You will never forget the smell. You will never forget the sound. You will never forget how they were looking at you, and that's it. You have to keep that inside you, and there is no way it's going to go away. Even if you take drugs, even if you see a psychiatrist, nobody is going to help you. So once you understand that, then you cope with that, and that's it. And again, it's a part of your training. You wanted to be there. You have been there. You pay the price for that. It's in you, and then you don't have to complain.
That sounds like a very harsh school of coping, but okay, we can understand. So let me ask you a different question. If you ask this question to your family, which has not received the training that you have received, your spouse and you said you had children. So who helped them to cope with this? Because it sounds like they would have to have some sort of training to cope with this.
Well, I try to teach my children a few things, and they made brilliant studies, but I always fear that they are not strong enough physically, and that one day they are going to pay that. They don't train physically enough to my view, and they, if something bad is happening to them, they may not be prepared enough. But again, it's 80% in your brain, and they are pretty strong mentally, so they can adapt. But what I was doing with my family was to keep them away from what I have seen. So it's painful because they never know what you have done, what you have suffered. But you tell them 1 year or 2 years later, and when you feel better to tell them, but they will never understand, because it's like when you see a movie on TV, you see an accident on TV, but you don't have the sound, you don't have the smell, you don't have the blood on your foot, you don't have to deal with the people injured. It's only on TV. You are far from that, and it's the same for them. And you have to understand that they will never understand, and that's it. Like when my father was talking to me, he would hardly explain what he suffered during the camp, but we could understand that at a certain time he was completely out of his mind, just because he was remembering things, and that's it.
So now that you're currently back in Europe, and you're working on investigations, financial investigation of terrorism, if I'm not wrong. Mm-hmm. So that's a very different day-to-day life. You work probably mostly with computers. You don't have to move. Is that the future for you, or is there another wave of operations still in you, or how is that? How's the future for you in that environment?
Well, you now being 58 years old, I still train. I still go fighting with. I'm a Thai boxing teacher. I still go boxing, but I see that when I'm boxing with a 30 years old guy, most of the time I'm losing, or it's pretty rough compared to the past. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that you have to adapt your activities. And I try to provide support to people who are like me in the field still today. And I try to increase the intellectual part of my activity and lower the physical part. Having said that, in some case, I'm working on a specific case right now, which is very important, and I have to collect information in a rough country and bring this information to the knowledge of the anti-corruption police in France. And the first call that I had with the head of this police, well, he told me, well, you don't have to go there and take the risk for us. And he said, I don't want you to do that. And I said, well, it's not your business. You take the information and you do your job with the information. How I get the information is none of your business. And still, you have to be ready at a certain time to risk your life and lose it, because it's your job, it's your mission, and it's worthy. It's up to you to understand whether it's worthy or not. If this is good enough to justify that you sacrifice yourself, then you do it, because it has a lot of consequences. Take the example of Daphne Galizia, who was a journalist working in Malta. She knew she had a lot of threats, death threats. She knew she was risking her life, and she died. She had a bomb under her car. She died knowing that it was going to happen. But after that, a lot of investigation were being done. The whole country in Malta understood that things had to change, and she won the war in a way that, of course, she sacrificed herself, but she won the fight, and things will change. To a certain way, I probably will have the same fate, because if you want to change the world, you have to be ready to fight and lose a lot and never surrender. And if you keep on having corruption at the speed of that we have here, at the level that we have here, it's going to be hell for your children, and you don't want to do that. You didn't bred them to live in a world like this, so there is no other choice. And our parents did that for us before, so every parent would like to sacrifice for the children. So it's not being a hero or whatever. It's your job. So that's it.
So to conclude this, I would like to understand, as the topic of the podcast is called Weird Sauce. So the approach to that is life is very strange and very unique to each experience. What is the weird sauce that you have established for yourself, Marc, over the years and over the various lives that you have? And can you share the main ingredients of that for you? And can you inspire perhaps people who are listening to this who are doing a totally different job or facing totally different problem, some of the things that have actually helped you not just survive, but overcome and thrive in very difficult environment?
One thing that people have to understand is that you are not trying to commit suicide when you do this kind of thing. You have to respect your family. If you want to have this kind of commitment, first of all, you have to make sure that your family is safe and able to carry on being safe if you are dead. Then already you feel good. You are mentally prepared to face whatever you have to face, and you know that your family will not suffer from that. That's the mentality that all the people like me, that the agent of the Mossad have, that the agent that are going in the field have. They know that if they have to face a very rough situation, no matter what is the outcome, they will have their family safe, and people will take care of them. Yeah, that's key. As an ingredient, some people would use religion as an ingredient, faith. I don't. I would say that I believe in the God of Spinoza in a way that, for me, every God is in the nature, and that's it. Not in a church, not in a synagogue, not in nature. If there is one, and we have to work to keep it safe and transmit it. Everything else rely on determination and the balance that you can have in your activity. Whenever you are going too extreme, then you know that you put yourself at threat, and your reaction will be probably wrong at a certain level at a certain time. So within your training, you have to put the sailing higher, but you have to understand that after a certain while, what you are doing start to be dangerous. As a physician, you can practice surgery and feel good after operating a lot of people, but at a certain time, you know that you are getting weaker and tired, and you are not God. You have to understand that you are not there to save people's life with no limit, and understanding that you have limits requires a lot of humility, and this is a good ingredient. I would say humility more than anything. You remember that you are not God. If people die, they die. It is their day, and that's it. But technically, I would stay away from drugs. That's one thing. Stay away from sugar. Also would be quite important. Not drinking, let's say, juice or anything that contain a lot of sugar. Be careful with the sugar, because it's clearly to a certain level your enemy. You have an addiction, and it doesn't help at all. You feel so much better when you are sugar-free. People have no idea, really. Especially, I remember that because when you look at the US soldiers, they drink Coke. When they go back to their base, the first thing they enjoy to do is to take a pizza and drink Coke. I always told them, you kill yourself with this crap. They don't understand, because it is within their that's deep in their roots in the US to have this kind of pizza and Coke. You know that after a while, this guy, within 2 or 3 years, they will have a lot of issues, and it's within their education. Fortunately, in France, we have an education where food is important. Food must be eaten at a certain time, while these guys, they eat all the time, whenever they can, and crap, even when they go back home.
That's also changing somewhat in France. But would you say that some of these skills should be taught at school?
Yes, definitely. In some countries, it's being done. Japan, China, the Asian country, you have this kind of teaching at school. It's pretty rough. It's probably not done in a proper way, I believe. Children have to understand why we are teaching them how to behave, something that at least they would need to have some basic knowledge. Probably not too early, but when they face the teenager attitude, when they start being teenagers, they need discipline, and that's a good way at this moment to teach them, well, you have a brain, a body. See what you can do with your body just because your brain wants it. How far you can go. It's amazing. Your ability, the way you can stand the pain, the way you can stand the pressure goes beyond your imagination. And that's a good way at this moment where they face all this kind of change in their body. That's a good timing, I would believe.
Marc Eichinger, thank you very much for having shared with us some of these very interesting experiences. For our audience who is Francophone, we will have another episode with Marc in French, talking about more current things on his activities in financial investigation and the way that he keeps his body and mind ready for that. So thank you very much, and hope to hear from you soon. Take care of yourself.
Okay. Thank you
Very much.
Bye-bye.
If this conversation stopped you in your track, share it with your network. You never know whose life you might change for the better. Thank you for listening. Stay curious about our next guest, and stay curious about life.